Good morning, and first of all, my thanks to the organization of this meeting, in particular to the splendid young people who have been assisting us with their beauty and their professional skillful. Also, a particular thanks to the Senator Guido Girardi, who actually invited me and had even the idea of this title, Science and Spirituality. You are probably more used to the dichotomy science-religion, an issue which has accompanied actually our civilization for the last centuries, from the famous Galileo trial till to the present day confrontation with the creationists. An argument which has been produced in many books, but notice that I'm not talking about science and religion, but on a kind different emphasis on science and spirituality. So let me first try to define what is the difference for me and for many others between religion from the one hand and spirituality on the other. For that, we take a step back of about 200 million to see this ancestor of us, and I put him there in an erected position, which going from this position to this was a very important event for the history of humanity, because standing up you can see the sky, and you can see the stars, and you can see the terrifying lightning and the terrifying dark clouds, but also the beauty of the sunset. And then with these things upon you in your eyes, the first question, then there are power over me, which are more powerful than me, and who am I then in all this power, in all these mysteries? So the first ideas of spirituality, having something much bigger above you, and the first questioning, who am I, the origin of consciousness. And then we can say that spirituality, which is a subjective experience, is something prior to religion, is something pristine in the nature of man, who is questioning from the very beginning the power around him, and the consequent question, who am I then in this big theater of mystery and power. Religion, of course, has a basis of this spirituality, but particularly in the course of history, has taken the form of something fixed, the codification of this feeling of spirituality into a fixed God, or at least if you don't have a God, as in Taoism or in Buddhism, a fixed monastic order with rather rigid hierarchic rules, and generally, particularly in our part of the world, also aim at political power. So this is an important difference. And in terms of science, I'm going to present what I consider the most important new paradigm of modern science, which for me and many others is the systems view of life. And you see here the book that I have the honor to write with Fritjof Capra, the famous author of the famous Tao of Physics, which a system U which encompasses all aspects of life, from the biological to the social to the ecological to the political. What systems U implies is probably known to most of you. We are surrounded by a system made by many parts, like an organism, like a social structure, a family, a tribe, a common market, or enterprise like a company or a hospital, or machines like our watch or cars, and many parts ensembling together to form this complex. And the main tenet of the system view is that the general important properties of this system are not due to the properties of the single components and parts which compose this structure, but are due to the web of interactions, to the links, to the bondage of all this part one with the other. So is the ensemble which is important, and actually the single part which are a kind of consequence of this ensemble. And I want to give you right away some example. This is indeed a very complex system formed by so many different parts. And let's look for simplicity at the organs of the human body, the liver, the lungs, the intestine, etc. And you see the many errors here, which are not due to the fantasy of the artist who made this illustration, but are physiology, in the sense that the stomach cannot do its own business regardless of what the intestine is doing, and the heart cannot beat at his will without taking into account the state of the other organs. This is just like a symphony orchestra where the musicians have to be in tune with each other, and only in this way can a harmony of the whole come out. Then with time and accident, they say that you arrive at a point which is usually called death, where you have still the organs which can perform even some of their function for a few minutes, but they're not in contact with each other anymore. Death is the picture of fragmentation. Life is the picture of integration. And this is so for all complex systems according to the system view of life. And also, of course, and you will see why I need that, at the level of cell, this is an ensemble of bacteria. Bacteria, as you know, is very pervasive. They have been with us since the very beginning of life, almost 4 billion years ago. They are less than 1 millimeter in length, very simple. But this simplicity is, deceiving, because if you look inside with the lenses of the biochemist, you find an appalling complexity. See, this is the part of the metabolic chart, as we say in biochemistry, of the metabolism of one bacterium, E. coli, but doesn't matter, whereas which represent all the reactions that describe the life of this organism. And here you see that each point represents a chemical compound, and each line represents a chemical transformation leading to another compound. And each line is, as we say in chemistry, catalyzed by a large proteins, which is called enzyme, and there is a different enzyme for each line. But mostly important, you see that all these compounds are joined together in a web. There is no one in the middle which stands alone and does alone its own business. So that the question, where is life of this bacterium? Where is life localized? Is there a point, a reaction, a chemical compound where we can say, here is the life of this organism? The answer is almost trivial, but very profound. Life cannot be localized. Life is a global property. The life of this bacterium is the entire web of connection, of interaction. And of course, the same is true for the elephant, and the same is true for each of us, where there is not a single point where you can say, this is Mr. Luisi. Mr. Luisi is the sum and the interaction with all chemical interaction together with all the psychic interaction together with memory together. And this notion that you have a collective with very important properties, but without a center of command, it's one of the most important notions in the modern theory of complexity, and would be beautiful to expand in various examples. But I want to now, since we talk about science and spirituality, take this picture and illustrate it to you using the language of Buddhism, which something I happen to know partly. You see, a Buddhist would tell you that each of these points conditions, causes, the next one, and is conditioned by the previous one, and actually each of them is caused by many other which all conjure to make the web around him, to make it and define it, is what they call co-dependent arising, which is one of their main pillars. The tree is caused by the seed, but also by the sun, by the rain, by the earth, by the farmer, many causes, and indeed causation is the main principle of rational Buddhism, together with the fact that each of these compounds have a very short life, sometimes milliseconds, they disappear, but they are formed again, so it's a continual dynamic interplay. And then, if you consider this cumulative effect of these two complementary notions, the codependent arising and the impermanence, you arrive at what can be seen as the world vision from the point of view of rational Buddhism. If all things are mutually linked and causally interdependent, at the same time they change, then the entire universe is not made by isolated, independent things, but is a dynamic, total interactive process. This is Buddhism, is at the same time also the system view of life of the modern paradigm of science. And indeed, we should be glad of this congruence between an old spiritual tradition, which is 2,500 years old, and this modern view of science. However, probably at this point an advanced Buddhist would protest. He would say, this is important, but the congruence may be only apparent. Why? What is the problem? The problem of this non-perfect congruence is the fact that the scientist, also the systemic scientist, is immersed in the duality. There is me and there is the external world. Even if the external world is the totality, there is this opposition, this difference between the observer and all what is outside. It's a kind of appearance that that the universe is made by two realities. The reality of my consciousness, whatever it happens, a baby crying, a tree moving at the wind, a car parking, it's also an experience which goes inside me. My consciousness accepts all, it's me. At the same time, it's also the world outside. It's a dualistic view, and all science is based on that most. This is not true for the Buddhist, which works for months and meditate and have Tesho and another form of teaching and hard work which may last years or the entire life to arrive at a point where this duality is dissolved into a unity. And the advanced Buddhist does not see two realities, but only one. And this is an important difference between science, which is always, whatever science you consider, it's always fixed in this duality. There is the observer, there is my consciousness, and there is the world outside, and the spiritual world which fights against this duality to reach a kind of unity. So, if we agree that science is mostly immersed in duality, can we still talk about spirituality on the viewpoint of the science? Here is where things become less clear, more subtle, more tentative. I would say yes. We know many scientists who are certainly characterized in part of their lives by a high degree of spirituality. And you see, if you consider system view in its totality, or you consider all the cosmology, you arrive at the edge of knowledge. Notice where you are. It's a grain of dust lost in a galaxy, and this galaxy is lost in an ocean of billions of other galaxies, each consisting of billions of stars. And then what there is afterward? You can say the infinite. But that's where you use words and you don't really know what you are saying. What is the infinite? You begin to, then if you insert the notion of dark energy, dark matter, the expanding space, that the space is curved, they are all things which are really above not only above your common sense, but also above your intellect. And the same is true for the microcosmos. If you go to the particles, now our colleagues from quantum mechanics are telling us that there are not such trivial things like matter and particles. All is dissolved. Perhaps we can talk about strings which can be scientifically described using a space at 20 or 30 dimensions, and there are things like the entanglement, the antimatter, where again our common sense certainly is lost, but also our mind has problem. Although, and this is interesting, you can still do good science, but the five senses do not follow your equations. It's something very abstract. outside the realm of your intellect, certainly an important development of the science when you are dealing with things that you don't see, the infinitesimally small or the infinitesimally large. But one can say that at this point where our mind wobbles and you find yourself floating in the darkness, in the anguish of the mysteries, where there perhaps there is an encounter between spirituality and science. You see, for the believer, certainly spirituality based on faith of God. For the lay scientist who does not use this tool of the faith in God, the spirituality is based on the wonder, also on the anguish of the mysteries of nature, and following this attempt to understand and be with the mystery. This also corresponds to a process of consciousness expansion. And you see what Albert Einstein says, the most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science. Notice that he didn't say the mysterious that we are going to solve. Mysterious remains for him mysterious, unsolvable. So we are immersed in a situation of non-solvable questions, and this is where you have to use another kind of knowledge tool other than your mind. And Carl Sagan adds, science is not only compatible with spirituality, is a profound source of spirituality. Now, this is then what we can say is, for me, the present situation. You have a kind of spirituality for the lay scientist, which is based on the acceptance of the mysteries and trying to be one or follow the spirit of this lack of absolute scientific knowledge. And as I said, this corresponds to a process of consciousness expansion, and it's also true that each scientist has his own process. For example, Einstein was saying till the last day, I am a profoundly religious man, meaning not church-going or the faith in God who made the world in 7 days, but this religion, this spirituality of being in contact with. Let me finish with this question. You know, spirituality, consciousness are really traits of the human, and consciousness also means capability of discriminating the good from the evil. Man is the only animal on earth who has this capability. At the same time, man is the only animal who systematically destroys his own habitat. So that, look what we have done from 1950 until now. We have destroyed 1/2 of the forest. We have now 400 ppm of CO2 in the atmosphere. There is this global increase of temperature, now up to 0.6 degrees, which certainly will go up to 2 degrees, with a consequent increase of the sea level of at least 1 meter, some others say 2 meters, etc. Ozone hole, 65% of land is no more available to farmer, nuclear waste, and then again the fact that despite this growth, 1/3 of the population is undernourishment. So maybe the only solution is to be found in a new consciousness of humankind in order to save our planet. We, in that book I showed to you, we devote the last 200 pages also to solutions which have been proposed by economists with a budget, but certainly all this cannot proceed without an inner changement. And for that, how this could be done, I leave the word to this man, Albert Einstein, who certainly combined the high degree of science with spots of spirituality. And in one of these pages, he has to say, and this is my last slide, but it's something we should reflect upon. A human being is part of a whole called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thought and feeling as something separate from the rest, a kind of illusion or delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace a living creature and the whole of nature in its beauty. So let's hope that we are going to be able to do that. Thank you.